What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Dr. Jeremy Weisz here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Daniel James, Mint Performance Marketing. And before I introduce you formally, Daniel, I always like to mention past episodes people should check out of the podcast. And there's one with Chris Madden that's been a fan favorite because he talks about NFTs, the metaverse, and advertising in the digital world. That's a popular topic. And he kind of goes through a nice walkthrough, like a 101 for people like me who don't know much, but actually kind of gave me a little masterclass in it in that session. And then I had Martin Greif of Site Tuners, and he kind of did a walkthrough. They do conversion rate optimization and website stuff, and kind of did a walkthrough of I guess you get a teardown of certain sites, including our own site. So it's kind of fun to watch, and I told him not to pull any punches with it. So check out that and more episodes on InspiredInsider.com. And today's episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. And we're an easy button for you to launch and run your podcast. We do strategy, the execution, and accountability to make sure it makes sense. And, for me, Daniel, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way to do that than to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. We've been doing it for over a decade. So I'm not sure what that is in internet years, but we're going to talk about internet years because Daniel actually worked with MySpace. So if anyone here doesn't know what that is, maybe you're too young, but one of the first, I don't know if it's the first, but one of the first social media sites. But without further ado, we have Daniel James. He launched his own growth agency, Mint Performance Marketing, scaled to 7 figures within 12 months. And like I was saying, his social media days actually go way back to being an early employee of MySpace. So he's seen firsthand the beginnings of social media. He's led marketing strategies for MySpace, AOL, Toyota, Adidas, Kraft, Disney, and many more. His agency actually got acquired by a global agency group, Social Chain. So he's the founder and CEO of Mint Performance Marketing, but also the CEO of Social Chain US. So Daniel, thanks for joining me.
Awesome. Great to be here. Thank you for having me on. I have to listen to that NFT podcast that you mentioned.
It's great.
I'm really interested in that space. Got a couple of friends doing some work in that space as well. So sounds like a good one. But yeah,
he talks about how he utilizes it within his agency as well. So it's kind of cool for an agency specifically too.
Definitely. Yeah.
So take me back to MySpace. What was it like in the MySpace days? And we'll talk about Mint Performance and what you do.
Yeah, like you said, I think MySpace was one of the first maybe recognized social media platforms. I'm sure there were smaller things before then, but it was the first one that really took off. Working there was a ton of fun. That's what I mainly remember. I'm sure we worked as well at some parts of the day. But it was a ton of fun. I think it felt, you could sense the excitement of it, of what was being built. We were always doing really cool things, innovative things. It was very creative. I had just started my own MySpace page for my band when I got the job.
What was the band?
We were called The Bets. I was lead singer and guitarist. Before I got into marketing, my aspirations were to be the next Kurt Cobain or Liam Gallagher.
Is there YouTube stuff online? Nothing.
No. I've got CDs that we recorded. I've got lots of photos of gigs. I've actually got the old 12-track recorder that we recorded all of our demos on in my house that I listen to from time to time. It still smells of weed from when we used to. It's got the authentic smell of what the band was all about. Beer and weed it smelled of. But yeah, before MySpace was all about music, and it was an amazing time. I it's when I first visited Los Angeles as well. I came over here and spent time with the MySpace team over here. That's when I also first decided I want to live in LA one day. I mean, from a lad from England coming over to LA, in the early 20s and being exposed to all the opportunity and big bright lights and everything else. I set my sights back then on one day moving to LA and running my own marketing agency. Took me a while to do it, but I did in the end. But MySpace was amazing. Super smart people. I was there for a couple of years. We did some really good stuff. I think obviously it paved the way for everything that came in the social space. And you could just see how rapidly it was evolving. Obviously when Facebook came around, started to steal the lunch a little bit. The writing was a little bit on the wall, but I mean, MySpace is still around. I say to people, it's what it probably always should have been. It was always a creative community space, right? It tried to do a bit of everything. So it was a social platform, but you had to kind of, code your page a little bit. When Facebook came along, it was that easy, just communication tool. And I think for anyone that wasn't more creatively driven, Facebook made more sense for them. And obviously have gone on to become what Facebook now is.
We're going to have to put, Daniel, find that, get the digital version of that CD and put it on YouTube or something. So,
we should.
I want to hear what you learned from, what you took from your experiences in MySpace and brought it into Mint Performance. But, some of the best marketers I know and business people I know started off in music because you really have to do everything. When you have a band, you have to get people there. How do you get people? They had to learn in the trenches. And, I had Greg Roulette on the podcast and he wouldn't rap at the end of the episode, but I did pull a clip of him at the end of that episode at one of his performances. I think he opened for Bone Thugs and Harmony at one point. Okay. So he, was legit rapper, but amazing business person. Also Kid Russell, shout out to him. His intro music and outro music it's his intro and outro music. And he's also works in the agency world as well. So I love it. So we're going to have to get it, put it on YouTube for sure. But what you bring? Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe agencies are the second choice of failed musicians.
There you go.
Seems to be a lot of us.
What did you bring your learnings in from MySpace and then your career into? Because your trajectory at Mint Performance Marketing was a quick scaling to 7 figures.
It was quick. I think at every position that I had before Mint, I was learning around the principles. I didn't study marketing. I didn't study what I do. I mean, I learned very much through application and from learning from other people around me. But I was working on very different size brands, frankly, prior to Mint. I mean, the reason I started Mint was I was working with these huge brands, and it was moving away from strategy and a little bit more, it was contract negotiations and overseeing teams, which I enjoy, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to work with brands where I could be more impactful on their business, and not it just be about, we've got this budget, spend it. Okay, cool. So how much you can bring strategy to that, don't get me wrong, but it lost its excitement to me after a while. So I think really what I took into Mint was this mindset of, I was always really disillusioned by how big brands used many, many, many different agencies for everything. And none of us would talk to each other, right? Because you've got competing interests. You don't have aligned incentives. What you're trying to do when you have fragmented agency vendors is you're trying to protect what you're getting from that brand. And obviously you're going to do the best job you can do. You're going to try and drive performance. But I think that world whereby things were so fragmented, I started Mint with the vision of we want to be a full service agency for disruptive e-commerce brands where they have one partner that can optimize and work across every aspect of the core things that drive success for that business. Now, we don't do everything, right? We don't do SEO, we don't do certain things within the broader digital sphere, but the core things of what we focus on, acquisition, retention, and the various capabilities that drive that. I one of the main things I took away is I didn't want to offer a fragmented service or capability to the brands that we would work with.
Let's talk about some of those. So, Ghost Golf.
Yes.
Talk about them and what do you do?
Ghost Golf, first of all, anyone who's into golf, you should check them out. I'm not being paid for this promotion. They're a great brand. And Andy, the owner, is a phenomenal guy, super cool guy. So we do everything for them. We do influencers, social media, paid social, Google, email, SMS, as well as we work on things like conversion rate optimization. We started working with Ghost Golf mid this year. And actually, he was working with many, many different agencies at the time. Not a bad decision. It worked for him up until that point. But I think one of the reasons we've been able to be so successful with Ghost Golf is when you have your influencer team, your social team, your paid team, your Google team, your email team in a pod working together, discussing how everything can connect to drive the most efficient, scalable, profitable performance. It just makes sense. And then from a vendor perspective, he's not talking to 6 different people trying to kind of protect what they want to do. It's you got a single growth strategist, everyone who's executing those channels. The strategy is aligned. Everyone's working towards the same strategy. So naturally, you're going to see more efficiencies, better performance, and a more cohesive kind of brand across the digital and social touch points that a consumer is coming across.
I want to break one of these down. Specifically, I find influencer marketing pretty fascinating and really allows companies to leapfrog, right? Because they're using someone else's audience influences they may have spent years building up.
Yeah.
So what makes a successful influencer marketing campaign, for Ghost Golf or for anyone?
Yeah. So, influencers can be used in a couple of different ways as well, right? So there's influencers or creators where you're partnering with them just for the creative. What you want is a high level of creative that's UGC, that's like people to people. And I'm a big believer in that. I think you need all the spectrums of creative at a certain level of scale to perform, but influencers do such a great job because it's so native and contextually relevant to the platforms that we're mainly advertising across, which is social, right? You see a person's face, it feels more native than if you see some very stylized kind of commercial type asset. So we use a lot of our influencers and creators. We have a huge creator network at Mint that we've vetted different creators, mainly to drive advertising success, right? So they're creating content based on a loose script, but making sure they talk across like the key points of the brand so we can use it within ads. The other benefit of influencers is, as you mentioned, where you're tapping into people with what you're really doing is using them to engage with their communities, right? They have a community because of X, whatever that might be. And so you're tapping into a community that is relevant to the brand because they follow that influencer for a reason. So there's a natural benefit there. Then you can amplify that through things like whitelisting or Spark ads, and engage with extensions of those audiences. There's a lot of data things you can do on the back end. And then from a volume perspective, the cost of what you might be paying them in product or a fee to produce the content versus media dollars often balances out to be pretty efficient, right? So depending on your goals and everything else,
and you're reaching someone who's warm, not cold. So even though the dollars balance out, you're hitting someone who trusts this person.
Exactly. What they say, people trust the values and opinions of others when they share common beliefs, right? So you're harnessing that, and you're harnessing it through a creative medium that, like I said, is super native to the platforms that you're on. So you're increasing your chances of that not being viewed as just an ad or whatever else, because it doesn't look like an ad necessarily. It's conveying value to the consumer, versus, hey, we're advertising to you because we want to tell you about us. There's a more of a shared benefit when it's coming from an influencer, I feel.
What are some of the mistakes you see people making when using influencer marketing?
Not thinking through that community element. It's not about is the influencer on brand. It's about, is their community relevant to the brand? Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a big difference. I think obviously the influence has to be decently on brand, but it's about, is their community engaged and the type of community we want to be tapping into. So I would think community first versus influencer first, right? They often align, but they don't always. I would say, and we take the approach, and I know other people do it differently. We take the approach of providing creative scripts. I think you don't want to restrict the influencer creator. They're an influencer and a creator for a reason. They've figured out a way to create content that's unique to them, that engages with people. That said, it doesn't always mean they're great at getting across what you want to from a brand perspective. So we always give guidelines, but allow the creative freedom for that to be produced in the way that they want. Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do with influencers is drive an end result. And I think this in our experience has had a higher chance of success of us getting a result than just, here you go, do what you want. So I think those two things are pretty key.
Yeah. I think right now in this moment in time, and we've seen a huge rise in TikTok, right, as a media channel. So whenever you're listening to this, I'm not sure where it's going to be at in the realm of other social media, but you mentioned on brand. So what have you seen working? And even watching Dancing with the Stars with my family, like one of them is kind of emerged as a TikTok influencer and is now kind of mainstream media star as well. Yeah. What have you seen works or doesn't on TikTok?
It's actually interesting about that. TikTok is producing like bigger personalities, and they're transcending TikTok into things like TV a lot more than I think Instagram influencers are. Maybe they did in the early days. I think a lot of the same things we were saying, like why is TikTok blowing up so much? One of the main reasons is it still has organic reach. So you can actually establish yourself on TikTok, whereas organic reach on Instagram is so challenging. If you haven't already built an audience, I think it's really difficult to do that these days on Instagram. So TikTok, the barrier to entry for creative is lower because it is all just UGC, content. It's all video, right? And it's got even less of a production level required than Instagram to be successful. So I think when you combine that with the fact that organic reach is so high, like it's very attractive to creators and you can establish an audience pretty quickly.
I've heard varying opinions, Daniel. I want to hear your take on it, on video where it's, let's take a spectrum of overly, like really produced versus not at all. Where do you fall, or where are your thoughts on that spectrum of what people should be creating for their brands?
It depends as with anything, how often do marketers say it depends? I think it's really true. I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I think ultimately you're gonna want both. I would say what drives quicker performance for a brand is you probably don't need to spend a ton of money on overly produced, stylized video content, especially not on TikTok, right? It doesn't mean you should be investing money into content production. But I would say, for brands looking to tap into TikTok and video, it really is, I think, that UGC content versus overly stylized, produced video content. That has its place. Don't get me wrong. It has a huge place in a brand, but I'd say by nature, that type of content is maybe more brand awareness, which like I think you need at a certain stage of a brand. Now, you look at other platforms like YouTube, I'd say YouTube requires, other than YouTube Shorts, I'd say YouTube requires more of that produced video, that story arc that works really well on YouTube. I think people on YouTube, performance on YouTube and the type of assets that work are that slightly more produced. And I go back to the same point, Jeremy, is like, what's your goal? And also what's native to the platform that doesn't feel out of place, right? Because if it feels out of place, it might catch your attention and therefore do really well, but it might just feel super irrelevant to the platform, and therefore you're going to just mosey on by without paying attention.
You mentioned, thanks for that. You mentioned loyalty, right? When talking about influencers, and before we hit record, we were talking about this, and you mentioned the exact topic, which is the importance of building loyalty and why now more than ever it's maybe super important.
Yeah. Brands are, there's a couple of factors, acquisition costs are getting more expensive. As we know, it's the natural increase in costs when platforms become more mature. So you never want to be acquiring a customer twice, right? Once you've acquired a customer and you've paid for that person to become a customer of your brand, you should be like, a huge focus should be on how do we keep them within our ecosystem? How do we get them to come back? So I think there's, and rightly so, a much larger emphasis on retention than maybe there was when during the Facebook heydays, where it's like, acquisition is so cheap, we can just keep acquiring. There's no shortage of customers we can acquire and it's cheap, so we're good forever. I think we take the approach as well of it's got to be scalable and sustainable, right? And as you get to certain levels of scale, from an acquisition perspective, it becomes even more expensive. So your retention efforts are hugely important in the sustainability and that whole CAC to LTV ratio. I think why is it even more important now? If you look at the macroeconomic climate, inflation rising, are we in a recession now? Probably. Are we going to be in one in a couple of months? Depends on how you classify it. Consumers are going to be even more picky about where they put their money, right? They're going to demand more from brands. They're going to be more cost conscious. So I think brands have to pay real attention to, really going above and beyond when you acquire a customer to keep them engaged.
One thing you mentioned about the loyalty too is just making sure you provide a really great experience for the customer. And so I'd love to hear a couple examples that you've seen personally. So, maybe it's brands you work with, or maybe just ones you've experienced because you purchased. What will be some examples of a good customer experience that you've had, or that you've, strategized with your clients?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of elements to that, right? When you think of experience, there's the experience of your communication as a brand upon purchase. There's the experience of how fast is my shipping. I think these days people expect fast shipping. I think that's one of the biggest things that possibly puts people off being a repeat customer. If your product takes a long time to arrive, which is where the whole supply chain and everything comes into place. Like that's a really big challenge for brands, right? Because I think actually the biggest impact on a consumer's experience with a brand is the shipping element, right? Like if you get your product the next day or within 5 days or whatever it might be, you're like, oh wow, that came really quickly. Like, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have got my products. If it takes longer than that, you're like, where the fuck is my thing? Like, what is going on? So I think that's one of the biggest things. Then when I think about it more from a, I guess, slightly more marketing angle, it's, it's how am I then following up with that consumer in terms of, is there a VIP program? Am I getting loyalty points? Am I being offered subscription? Are they paying attention to what I've purchased and therefore what I might be interested in? One of the things I am a big believer in is, you think of the world of social, how the product arrives and is it shareable, right? If you get a product and it's in just a blank bag in a cardboard box with a bunch of tape around it, okay, cool, you open it, you use it for whatever it is, whatever the product is. If it's in cool packaging and it's got a thank you note and a couple of stickers and maybe a lot of people are going to take a picture of that, post it on Instagram and say, thank you so much, XXX, for my product. That's word of mouth. That's digital, social word of mouth advertising that you're getting for free based on paying a bit more attention to how a product arrives in your consumer's hands. So I think those are a couple of things to really be paying attention to when it comes to like that overall experience.
I love that. Yeah, as you say that, it's funny. It's stuff that is you don't even, or at least for me, it's not like it's just this glaring thing that's happening. It's almost like this subtle thing. We ordered slime. If you have young kids and our kids are into slime, stuff. But it came with like a couple cool little stickers and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that, and I just thought, that's kind of cool. And it was part of the customer experience that wasn't just over the top, but it was definitely, it added to that experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. It makes it feel special versus just getting the product, like I said, in a bag or a cardboard box.
Talk about another company that you worked with is New Republic.
Yes.
And what were some of the things that you worked on with them?
So New Republic is a mainly a footwear brand based in LA, run by really good friends of mine, Dee Murthy and Josh Kaplan. And New Republic has a lot of SKUs, right? So I think this is the other thing that we talk a lot to brands about, where they're a multi-SKU brand, is you can advertise everything, or you can double down on what the hero product is, right? The gateway drug, for lack of a better word. So a lot of our work with New Republic really was around, well, what's the hero product? What's the flagship one or two products? And it's seasonal because it's footwear. So in the summer, it's a sneaker. In the winter, it's boots. But really making that the hero and optimizing that journey as much as possible. So going from prior to when we took over, every shoe was being advertised, right? Everything. And so performance was, oh, you might have a good day on this shoe. Oh, but then it trails off. And then this shoe might trail up. So it was it wasn't very consistent. And I think that's what I see a lot from brands where they haven't identified or launched their brand in a way that there's a flagship and then the supportive supplemental products that you upsell through email, SMS, or whatever else. So we're able to double down, and the brands kind of knew what their hero products were. They just didn't have the advice from their previous marketing team that we should really focus our advertising efforts on it. So it wasn't that the brand didn't necessarily know, because they know footwear and seasonality better than anyone that I know. But what we were able to do is really focus on creative testing around those hero products, an optimized landing page experience, and then really use email and SMS as a way of cross-selling other products to people that were brought in through the two core hero products that were identified. That is such an unlock to kind of like that incubator stage of a brand where you're selling, but to unlock that real growth potential. I think that's one of the main ways I've seen us be able to do that is, okay, cool, you've got 12 products, but which is the one? What's the one that's going to get people to really buy in? And then the others we can sell as add-ons, have them as upsells in your cart, or like I said, an email or SMS afterwards. But yeah, that's the work we do with New Republic.
Yeah, I love
doing with them.
I love thinking about like 80-20, right? There's always the 20% of the products that are resulting in 80% of the revenue. So focusing in on those. You mentioned SMS, Daniel, and this kind of goes into kind of, you didn't say this, but kind of like your steps for providing a great customer experience. One of those was communication. Under that is SMS, and you mentioned that part for New Republic. What are some mistakes you see people make with SMS marketing?
The mistakes that are made with SMS and email, if I'm honest, any of those kind of direct communication channels, is lack of personalization, like on any level. So lack of personalization based on not segmenting your users based on their previous and current touch points or experiences with the brand. I actually had this with the brand. I think it was SMS. Or was it? I can't remember exactly. It was an ads actually and an SMS. I'd already bought the products that I was going to get bombarded with to buy. It's like, pay attention. You know, it just puts you off. It's very unpersonal. So
Did you send them your website? Be like, I think we can help you.
I didn't. But I should.
I already bought this. I think you can maybe use my help.
I know. I should. We're at capacity though at the moment, so we can't take people on at the moment. But yeah, I think a lack of personalization is one of the biggest things. If you're gonna, it's such a personal communication channel, right? My text messages. You're there in between your girlfriend and your mom or whoever, your significant others. If you're going to text me, it needs to be relevant, right? So I think personalization and relevancy to who I am as part of your consumer base or subscriber base, excuse me, I think is super important. And then I think with SMS as well, lead with, I think always leading with value and don't overdo it. And no one wants to be bombarded with text from anyone, let alone brands, even if you love that brand. So I think there really has to be a high level of value exchange on the brand side. Email can be more frequent, right? But I'd say SMS specifically, less frequent, super personalized, and a very high level of value exchange on the brand's part. I saw an example on LinkedIn, actually, the brand Bloom. They were giving Starbucks vouchers, I think it was. Nothing to do with the brand. It was probably connected somehow, but like, I like that. As a consumer, I'm gonna that puts that brand up in my estimations if they're gonna do that for me. It's probably like buy something and get a Starbucks gift voucher, right? I'm sure they're not just giving away free. I can't remember exactly, but that's an extra value. That's building loyalty. That's a great experience. That's using SMS in a really cool way. It doesn't feel like you're just attacking me in my inbox or my SMS inbox. So yeah.
Daniel, when I was looking through, and if you're listening to the audio, you can look at the video. I'm showing, we're looking at mint-performancemarketing.com. Love the look and feel of your website. And I was looking through, and a couple things stuck out. One brand that's always fascinated me, and I saw you work with them, is Mudwater. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about the things that you did with them.
Yeah, so Mudwater, Shane and Paul, amazing guys, lovely guys. They've built an incredible brand. We worked with them for a while, kind of early on. They were actually doing a tasting at the WeWork that was our first office when it was just, there wasn't very many of us in the company at the time. And they're amazing to work with, super smart. What was interesting with those guys is I think they're just doing a phenomenal job of how they position the brand. And we were helping them with their advertising on social, some Google, I think some influencer stuff as well. And what I loved about it is they were very, they really understood the brand. They really understood who their target market was. And the creative, which Shane and Paul were kind of key in, was kind of attacking coffee. And what I really liked, or my biggest memory of it, was you would have people in the ad comments defending coffee. Like, fuck you, what is this? Like, coffee is the best. And then, some of the ingredients in their cordyceps, I think it was, is it something to do with a bug? I don't know. It's like, what is this got fucking bugs in your drink. But what I liked is they were like, this is amazing. Because then what you'd see is people who liked mud water come in and be like, shut up, like mud water is the best. Coffee does this to you. Like, so you'd have this thing going on in the ad comments, which was like people attacking the product, but then fans of the product defending it. And I just really loved I think it's quite a brave move. And I think one that paid off, that they're like, no, leave it. Let that happen. I would argue maybe a lot of brands, if they were seeing such negative comments in their ad comments, they'd scrap the creative, or they'd delete the comments, or they'd do something. But the fact that you were having this back and forth between fans of the product and then real coffee defenders, I think did a lot to kind of spark the virality of some of those ads that they were running at the time.
Yeah, you see some really good campaigns have an enemy, right? I mean, even you look at Apple, right? Their early on ads. And you could see, like, even in their, it says Mudware, a coffee alternative, right?
Yeah.
And it talks about morning ritual.
Yeah. I think they've also done, super smart things like subscription only, that value add of having the creamer and the mixer. Again, we only worked with them early on, but they've gone on to do amazing things. But that I think it was a brave move of them and a really smart move of them at the time to be quite strong of, we are this and we're against this, right? To take that strong stance and allow people to, like, in the comments, like I said, kind of argue about it. I think was brave and smart, and it definitely worked.
Love that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that story, Daniel. I want to talk acquisition, right? You grew really fast. How did that conversation get started from an acquisition standpoint?
So Social Chain invested in us. They're quite a percentage of our company. And the conversation came about somewhat surprisingly. What I'll say is, I've known of Social Chain for a long time, coming from England. They were started in Manchester by Stephen Bartlett, incredible entrepreneur and marketer who's gone on to do phenomenal things. And Oliver Yonchev, who was the MD of Social Chain US at the time, we'd known each other on the circuit, different events, social media week events and stuff like this. And we met up in LA for coffee, and he was asking about the agency Mint. And I mean, we were only 2 years in at the time. And really the way it came about is Social Chain has built its business and its name and its legacy on doing really creative, social first creative, like, campaigns, more around like brand awareness, really tapping into social media as a way, like a communication tool to the consumers. They never really had a performance element to what they did in terms of like acquisition or true paid media as it relates to like more lower funnel performance. And so the opportunity was tie those two worlds together, right? How can we tie the world of more brand marketing with performance marketing, which has been something that I've always been baffled as to why they're so separate. Baffled's the wrong word. I know exactly why they're so separate, but it shouldn't be. So the opportunity to be able to, work with Social Chain and start to try and tackle those challenges and offer those solutions was a huge one for me. And I've got a massive amount of respect for Oliver. He's not there anymore. He's working with Stephen at Flight Story. But that's how it came about. And like I said, I'm a big fan of Social Chain and fortunate enough that I was made CEO of Social Chain US about 3 months ago now. So converging those two worlds of brand and performance, I think not only has always made sense, I think as we move into next year, and again, not to put a downer on things, the challenging economic market, brands want efficiencies. It's the common thing in marketing. What's the first thing to get cut, right, from a brand's P&L? Marketing is a super easy line item on a P&L to cut. It's so short-term thinking because you won't see an immediate decline in revenue, but you'll see it in 3, 6, 12 months time, right? That's kind of how it works. So I think being able to tie brand and performance together and have that cohesiveness across the entire consumer journey is something that makes sense from a consumer perspective, makes sense from a performance perspective, and will make more sense for brands in terms of efficiencies, both from their marketing dollars, but also their vendor relationships as well.
When an acquisition conversation starts, obviously to agree on, if someone's investing a percentage in the company, how'd you come to the value?
I asked for the highest possible, and they narrowed it down and to a point that I was happy.
I mean, for you, even if you ask for whatever, they're going to say, how'd you come to that number?
Yeah.
Right? What'd you factor in there?
There's a couple of things, right? There's obviously it's a multiple on EBITDA, right? And different verticals valuations, as you know, are based on different things, right? So from a service-based company, I think your valuation is heavily tied on your EBITDA. It's also heavily tied to, are you growing? What is your profitability? The length of your contracts. Do you have forecastable revenue or not? What's the composition of your team? If you're a freelance contractor only agency, your value is less than if you have full-time employees that have been there for a while, right? So that we were aided by the fact that we've been profitable from day one. We were growing year over year. We had established employees that were at the company, had been at the company for some time. We had forecastable revenue because we do contracts with our clients. We don't do month to month. So I think all those things aided me in getting a good valuation. And for anyone else who's building a service-based business, those are the factors that people are going to look at.
Was there a certain percentage that you would or weren't willing to give up in the sale?
I think it was important for me at the time that I still had control. Because why did it? Because we were really early. This wasn't a sell some of the company because I want to cash out and go and chill somewhere. It was a strategic alignment opportunity. So based on that, it was always going to be a smaller percentage to allow for that strategic alignment to happen in a more seamless way. Because the other thing we did coming into Social Chain was I actually built out a UK team to service Social Chain's internal brands. So the big opportunity there for Social Chain was, well, we have all these e-commerce brands. Our current agency doesn't have the capabilities to drive e-commerce success. So they're outsourcing performance marketing to other agencies. So what their investment into Mint allowed is for me to take all the things that have allowed us to become good at what we do in the US and build a team in the UK that could service those internal brands.
Daniel, I have one last question. Before I ask it, I want to point people to go to mint-performancemarketing.com to learn more about you and the company. Check out more episodes of InspiredInsider.com. Last question. I don't think, Daniel, I've ever asked this question before, but I would love for you to do a short tattoo walkthrough. Because I thought there's always an interesting story of why people have a tattoo. And I noticed when you were using your hands, there's a couple tattoos. So I'd love for you to do a brief tattoo walkthrough. I want to be am I one of the only CEOs of a media agency, marketing agency that has face tattoos? I don't know. I'm covered in them. So this one actually is one of my favorites. It's the Japanese lettering for the word Kaizen, which means continuous improvement, which is just such a theme for me and how I live my life in business. And, I'm big into my fitness. And
I think every day I'm trying to improve. I would say I don't have a ton of tattoos that have much meaning. Other than this one, that's my granddad on my hand. An old school picture. I've got my daughter's name tattooed on my wrist. Everything else is more just because I feel like it looks cool. I do have lots of portraits. I've got Kurt Cobain, Travis Barker, my granddad, Liam Gallagher. And actually on Twitter, my handle is foodog85. 85 being the year I was born, and because I've got 2 Japanese food dogs tattooed on my chest.
I'm tempted, but I won't make you take your shirt off.
Probably best. I've got a bit of holiday weight going on right now, so maybe in the summer.
That's a deal. No, Danny, I want to be the first one. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your stories, your journey. Super valuable. Everyone check out mint-performancemarketing.com. And Daniel, I'm the first one to thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on. Been a pleasure.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.